7, 6, 5.
Greetings and welcome to the U.S. Sailing Starboard Portal. Today we are honored to have Charlie Enright and Mark Towill from the 11th Hour Racing team to share with us a bit about their bid for the next ocean race. We'll have plenty of time for questions at the end, so please make sure to pour those in on the comment section of YouTube here, and we'll be keeping an eye on those and be sure to ask them as we go along. But for now, please help me welcome Charlie and Mark as they share a little bit about what they've been up to and what they're doing.
All right. Thank you, Nathan, and hello, cyberspace. Just a little background on our program, kind of before we get into the Q&A. Mark and I together announced kind of the formation of our existing campaign sometime in the middle of last year. And the first 6 months were about getting all the infrastructure in place, kind of laying the groundwork. These campaigns are a lot more complex than they might appear on the surface. So kind of getting all the building blocks together on the performance side, the sustainability side, communication side, shore side, logistics, you name it. So there's a lot going on there. And then as part of the performance aspect of the campaign, we really tried to assimilate ourselves into the French AMOCA culture. We partnered with Francois Gabar's kind of management outfit, guys called Mare Concept, based in Brittany, in Port-la-Forêt, actually. And that's where we staged out of, and that's where we trained essentially from June through October. And one of our big focuses for the first year of the campaign was the TJV, or the Transat Jacques Fab. My French has not come along as quickly maybe as it should be, but I had the pleasure of sailing with Pascal Bidigary from Le Havre in France to El Salvador, Brazil, which was pretty cool. Notched a good result in a good platform. We were fortunate enough to acquire the old Hugo Boss, which has now been named 11th Hour Racing. And we're really excited to kick things off. And maybe Mark can share a little bit about the organization that is 11th Hour Racing.
Yeah, as Charlie mentioned, since we've launched the team, I guess 9 months ago, there's been a lot going on, and we just feel extremely grateful to have the support of 11th Hour Racing as our title sponsor. If we've learned anything from the last 2 Volvo Ocean Race campaigns, it's that sailing teams, and in particular in this event, have such a unique opportunity to tell a story and to share a message. And it's been a really amazing partnership in that 11th Hour Racing's mission is so aligned with ours. So we're really focused on trying to dive into the sustainability element of what we do and to tell that story to a broader audience. So we've been working quite a bit on the sustainability side and the communications piece as well over the course of the last 9 months or so. There's about four main pillars to our sustainability campaign, and you can find more info about that on our website. But definitely in the next coming months and over the course of the campaign, we're going to be looking to try to share even more about what we're doing from that perspective, and hopefully try to have a longer term impact on the greater marine industry and really how professional sports teams are run in general.
It's no secret that our ambition is to, build this campaign into a campaign capable of competing in and winning what's now affectionately referred to as the ocean race. As many of you are aware, Volvo's dropped its at least title sponsorship, but they've continued as a secondary partner, which is great for helping the race move forward, especially through these difficult times. But they are going to sail the next edition of the ocean race in 2 different classes of boats. The one design Volvo Ocean 65, now called the Ocean Race 65, which is the same one design format that Mark and I have, been part of in the past. 2 laps around the world actually in that very boat. Small.
Exact same hull.
Yeah, that's actually the Alvametica boat as well. I don't know how many people actually know that, but we've competed almost 90,000 miles in that boat and sailed a lot more training and in between. And it was actually pretty interesting to see it. We just competed against it in another race, but kind of getting off track here. But our focus, for the next couple months here has been the Amoca 60, which is a different thing for us, certainly. A development class, a box rule. The Amoca 60 is a very established class in France with a very regular, reoccurring schedule, which is awesome. I mean, they're coming up on their pinnacle event, which is the Vendée Globe, which is a single-handed, nonstop around the world race from La Sève d'Olonne. And they actually have 33 entries in that race, which is expected to kick off, like I said, first week in November. They actually had to open up the race because the demand for the race was so high. I think that speaks to the health of the class and the passion really for sailing in the country of France. But the big move in the Amoca class, through between the last Vendée and this Vendée, has been the advance of offshore foiling. You can see that these boats have moved into a league of their own when it comes to monohull offshore foiling. There's some restrictions being put in place moving forward on foil size and potential elevators, but that's all kind of down the road. As it is now, there are some one design elements of the class to control cost. It's a one design rotating wing mast. It's a one design keel cant system, which is great. But then there's a lot of room for development, in the foils and the sails, in the rudders, the cockpit layouts, the systems. So it's a whole new game for us, for Mark and I personally. We're really enjoying the challenge. And, in some ways, the race is, the ocean race, the Vendée, all these events are being won and lost before they even get competed on the kind of naval architecture side, which is interesting and scary at the same time. So those are the boats. Maybe Mark, you can touch a little bit on the proposed course for the ocean race.
Yeah. So the ocean race has done a lot of work in the background to solidify the course, and it just got formalized not too long ago. When you look at it holistically, very similar to races past, starting and finishing in Europe. We don't have the exact dates, but generally around the same timing. It looks like as of now, starting sometime in the middle to late fall of next year in 2021. One interesting change when you look at the first leg is traditionally, one of the big decisions in the first leg from Spain down to South Africa is, do you hug the African coast or do you try to get west? And so the introduction of the Cabo Verde pit stop will shake that up a little bit, but place that I've personally never been. I don't know that Charlie has either. So that'll be an interesting twist. Another interesting challenge will be the leg from Cape Town up to Shenzhen in China. In the past few editions of the Volvo Ocean Race that have gone to China, back in our Alva Medica race was the last one. We were coming from Abu Dhabi, so we went through the Malacca Strait, which, from a sustainability perspective was just completely eye-opening and will honestly break your heart just with how much marine debris and pollution there is in that part of the world. But it looks like we'll be transiting from the Southern Ocean up into the China Sea through some relatively uncharted waters. So that'll be an interesting challenge as well. And a very kind of big difference in conditions from full Southern Ocean leaving Cape Town to then what sounds like a pretty light air part of the world, getting up through through Asia there. Pretty standard. China, I guess standard all things considered for the ocean race. China down to Auckland, and then your classic Southern Ocean leg, which is always a memorable one. And then up to Newport, which is fantastic. Third time that Newport's been the U.S. stopover, and we really that is home for Rhode Island's home for Charlie. It feels like my second home, having gone to university there and just spent so much time there. Nathan, I know you're in Rhode Island right now as well, so that's going to be really exciting, and we're hoping to spend a fair bit of time in Newport, leading up to the start. So that'll be really good to engage with all of our local supporters there, which we're very appreciative of. And then another interesting bit is really these last couple of legs. You have your classic transatlantic, but it finishes up in Aarhus in Denmark, which is quite a bit further north than where I'd say more traditional transatlantics finish in the UK or sometimes even a bit further south. So that'll be interesting, and how the ice limits play into that and everything else will be an interesting twist. And then the finish in Genoa, finishing back in the Med is not something that we've seen a lot. And if this coming race is anything like the last one, where you had 3 boats tied going into the last leg, it could be quite interesting that after sailing all the way around the world, it could come down to some very tactical coastal sailing inside the Mediterranean. So I'd say all in all, big picture, very similar course to races past, but with some very interesting twists to come. And that's just a little bit about the course from our perspective. And I think that's the culmination of our slides. So we'll kick it back to you, Nathan, if you have any questions or questions from the audience.
Awesome, great. So it's all sounds really exciting. So the first thing that I have as a question is that with 2 different boat classes this edition of the race, was there ever any consideration to go with what you guys are comfortable with? I mean, you stated you had, 90,000 miles in a Volvo 65. Why not stay there?
That's a very good question. I guess firstly, we're big supporters of the 65 class and the one design concept. We certainly don't think that we would have been able to do a lot of the stuff that we've done without the 65 as a platform, and the one design as the way the race chose to align itself. That said, we felt like personally we were ready to take on a new challenge, and some of the prospects of a development class were really enticing. And the goal of this campaign for us is to win the Ocean Race Trophy, and that trophy is competed for in the IMOCA class. So that helped drive the decision as well. So yeah, I mean, those are the main causal factors. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to add, Mark.
No. Spot on.
All makes sense to me. So for those who may not know, with the IMOCA class, it's always been either single or double-handed. This is a new kind of development for the class itself, adding a bunch more crew on board. What things do you need to change in order to make that happen?
I can probably start, but I actually think Charlie's better suited to answer this question. As you mentioned, these boats really are designed for one person, sometimes 2, but when you have 2, one person tends to be sleeping and the other's awake. So sailing them with a full crew, and as that's defined now in the IMOCA class, is a crew of 5 plus an onboard reporter for a total of 6 people, is quite a challenge. After the TJV, we did a training run from Brazil back to France, and I don't know if anyone's read Amory Ross's blog, but it was, I think, a very compelling firsthand experience of what it was like to be on that trip. So that's definitely something we're very mindful of is the livability, and I can also attest to the fact that the boats are a bit more violent with the foils at certain angles, and so just existing, and let alone getting rest and therefore being able to compete at a high level, is going to be at a premium. So it's one of the things we're very focused on.
Great.
Yeah, I guess kind of to expand on that a little bit. I mean, it was tough to fully prepare for the fully crewed delivery that we did back from Brazil without making too many compromises for the race down to Brazil. That said, we did put a little effort into it, and it was really, really difficult. It becomes like a volumetric issue. There's just not that much space down below for living. I mean, you're trying to maximize water ballast. You got big foil cases. The boat's gone from 70 to 65 feet to 60 feet. It's a challenge just to live. And as Mark said, the foils present a interesting motion in the ocean, to say the least. And that's down below. That's just existing. On deck, trying to find a place for 5 people to work together to sail the boat. One pedestal, tiller. A lot of these boats get sailed with AutoPilots. So physically driving the boat for extended periods of time can be difficult with visibility, and so that's a huge part of it, is adapting this existing fleet into something that's comfortable and competitive, and a place that you can live basically for 9 months and 40,000 miles or whatever it is.
Social distancing at its finest.
Exactly. So, Charlie, you mentioned that there's talk about autopilots, and we're getting some comments here for the ocean race. Will you guys be allowed to use autopilots, or is that something that's going to be turned off for these boats?
So the plan as it stands is to have a supplied one design heading only autopilot. The goal of the race organization is to have these sailors drive the boat. The human element of this race is what's made it what it is for, as long as it's been one of the pinnacle events in the sport, and they don't want to take that element away. I was new to autopilots certainly before this summer, and they can do some pretty amazing things for sure with wind input. True wind angle, apparent wind angle, you can adjust the rudder gain, the push pull. There's AI being developed in that space as well. But they're also really sketchy sometimes. Sometimes you wake up and Chinese jive and we'd have the sail plastered into the rig. And, I learned on the fly. I learned quickly. I'd never done any shorthanded stuff. It was a kind of crash course, and no pun intended. And it was amazing to see what it could do, but it's going to be very, very different having to actively sail and drive the boat. Different certainly from how Amokas have been sailed in the past.
Cool. So question coming in from the Great Lakes from Matt Gallagher. He's asking about the onboard reporter. Do we know if that, yeah. Do we know if that's going to be a pooled position? Is that going to, the reporters shared amongst boats? Or are you guys looking for one reporter to add to the crew list and that's the way it rolls?
Yeah, it's so if you rewind to the 2015 race, the OBRs were a part of the team, and we had Emery Ross as our OBR. And then in the last race, there was an effort to try to gain a little bit more of an objective perspective from the OBRs. So they actually were a pool of them employed by the organization, the race organization, and then they rotated between the boats. And for this coming edition, it's gone back to the way it was in the 2015 race. So you are allowed to have an onboard reporter that you as the team select. They need to be vetted and sort of approved by the race organizations, that there's a kind of a minimum level of quality as far as the content's concerned that's being put out. But yeah, so the intent is to have the same person on our team. We have Emery Ross with us now, which we're very excited about, and a lot of history there with the three of us sailing together. So that should be hopefully a strength of ours.
I think the boats are going to be really difficult to sail, as we kind of insinuated before. So we're probably going to have backup in every single position on the boat. And if Matt Gallagher is thinking about a career change, he can
come on down, Matt. It's actually an interesting point Charlie brings up, because in the 65s and even the 70s, there was a dedicated sort of media desk where the OBR had his own desk and his own seat, and area to charge all of his different cameras and open his laptop. And I don't know if people realize, but a lot of the photos and the video content that was getting sent off the boat was actually edited by the OBR on board the boat. And so imagine being down below and looking at, this video and the horizons moving while you're on a boat that's moving as well. I certainly couldn't do that. But as Charlie talked about earlier, there's such a premium on space in these Amokas. It's a little bit undefined how that's going to play out, but everything inevitably is going to become more compact. I think we're looking at iPads instead of computers, and reduction in gear and whatnot. So that'll be a challenge as well to maintain the same level of quality, but ultimately have fewer resources to do it.
Great. So we've got a question here from North Sails. How does not sailing in a one design change the way that you're preparing for this race?
Kick it over to Mr. North Sails for this one.
Yeah, I can take the question. The development and the testing, are certainly the biggest things. I mean, we were lucky enough to participate in the Port La Forêt training camps, which is in the lead up to the TJV at least, and now they're going to happen this summer as well as the lead up to the Vendée. But nowhere in the world are there as many boats of one class sailing and practicing and testing offshore in an organized manner. So we would kind of report to training camp, and we'd come up with objectives as a group, and then there was transparent data sharing. We'd all race to a particular place, stop, talk on the VHF, reset, It's amazing to see the system that those guys have developed over the last 15 years or whatever it's been. But there's certainly a focus on performance analysis, analyzing the log files, adjusting your polars, because obviously it's garbage in, garbage out. Everyone's kind of got the same software, same routing algorithm, so getting that polar right is very important. And then always trying to be better, never resting on your laurels. And the foils and the sails are certainly going to be a big part of this next race. As the boats fly out of the water, the hull itself, the platform, gets less and less important. I think everyone's kind of hip to that, but yeah, that's a big focus. I mean, we narrow it down to having a light boat, having the best foils, and having the best sails. I mean, those are our three kind of. Bring it back to that. Are those three things going to help us win the race? Does this contribute to in those areas? That's how we've kind of broken it down.
Awesome, makes sense. So going back to the foils question, what are your concerns heading into the Southern Ocean or other areas of the world where if you're not always guaranteeing clean water? Is there anything you can do to prepare for that and prepare, I guess?
Yeah, it's something that we've talked about a fair bit. You obviously want to prioritize performance with the foils, and as Charlie mentioned, it's such a driving part of the performance these days. So getting the shape right is going to be extremely important. And there's some big decisions to make there. You've seen probably everyone's seen some of the footage of boats like Chiral and whatnot lifting out of the water, and there's sort of flying versus skimming is a big sort of theoretical decision when it comes to the foil shapes. But then to your point, how do you prepare for the unexpected, hitting something in the ocean, whatever it may be, some marine debris or something, and having that not put anyone on the boat in danger or the boat itself. So are there ways that we can design things into the cases, the boxes, the foils themselves, all things that we're actively looking at.
I think it's important to point out that the whole foil concept in this class is really the Wild West. And when you look at some of the differences in foil shapes at certain angles and in the VPP and even in real life in the TJV, I mean, boats can be going, 3 to 4 knots, difference in speed. It's
in
crazy.
The same conditions at the same angle.
Yeah, and
Wow.
in the last Vendée Globe in 2016, you saw Verdier and VPLP working together to design a majority of the fleet. And foiling was still a new concept. And now, in this next edition of that day, you'll have boats from Verdier, from VPLP, from Poinquet, and from now Sam Menward. And, it's not clear what the best solution is. They have their strengths, they have their weaknesses. You need to optimize for the course, for the weather, for the race. And another thing that's interesting is there's a 5 degrees rake adjustment, or second degree of freedom, I should say. It's allowed in the foils as well. So how the rake system works, I mean, there's a lot of unknown here, for sure. It's new space. It's exciting to be part of.
That's awesome. So you've mentioned before that you guys have acquired the former Hugo Boss boat, and Charlie, I know you've spent plenty of time on that, and I assume you have as well, Mark. Will that be the boat that you guys are taking around for the next lap, or is there another one on the build schedule?
Our ambition is certainly to build a new boat, and we've put a fair bit of effort into that. Given everything that's happening in the world right now, we're sort of reevaluating our strategy and our approach. So I guess stay tuned on that particular topic, but it's certainly the goal.
Got it. Great. Questions from out in the field, and this is from Alan Backus. What percentage of the time do you expect to be up on the foils? And maybe to elaborate on that from my own personal wanting to know, are you able to foil at all wind directions and speeds and that sort of thing? What's the limitations?
I think Mark touched on it before. I mean, there's a kind of big decision to be made about flying versus skimming, and how much is realistic, and in what conditions can you actually do it. As the boats are currently constructed and as the rules written, I mean, you're not going to be fully foiling. You're not going to be getting rid of the entire displacement of the boat. We kind of operate on a 70%, 80% is a lot, as far as getting the boat out of the water. how you design the foils and what your desired takeoff speed is versus what you want the top end speed of your boat to be is a big crossover, a big compromise. But we'll never fully be out of the water, I hope. But the goal is to get that foil working for you efficiently as soon as possible, and obviously getting those top speeds as well. So managing that crossover is probably the most important part.
I'd say sea state's also a big factor as well. Of course, wind speed. You need enough wind to get up and foiling, and then there's definitely a crossover where you have too much wind. You'd hope to not be foiling in a 60-knot squall in the Southern Ocean, for example. But the sea state element of it is quite a big factor.
Got it. Now, Mark, I know you touched on this before, but coming in from the Mud Rats. Hey, Mud Rats.
Hey, Mud Rats. Brandon.
They'd like to know what sort of steps you guys are taking to make the actual preparation and running of the race more sustainable from your team perspective itself. If you can share any on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a number of things we're doing. I guess I'll just touch on the four main components of our sustainability in no particular order are to minimize our footprint, maximize our impact, to develop collaborations as many as possible, and then to leave a legacy. And so in terms of the operational side, really there's a strong emphasis on minimizing our footprint. During the last campaign, we tracked all of our consumption, not just from it was everything from water, electricity, waste, all of these various inputs. We were able to calculate our carbon footprint and offset that. So we were actually a carbon neutral campaign, and measuring those things from our perspective is extremely important to understand, what impact you're having, and then ultimately from there be able to drive your decisions on how we can change our actions to be better. So we, utilize the data from the last race quite a bit. And we have a sustainability plan, which is quite an extensive document, which really governs all of our actions. There's just as a few examples, we have a purchasing protocol. So anytime we're going to go out and buy something, we evaluate, is that the best choice from a sustainability perspective? That's one of the decisions that go into purchasing things. We've done a fair bit of research on the boat building and construction element and process, and have identified a few areas to try to make some improvements there. And that's going to be a big focus from a communication standpoint, is trying to tell that story as we're building foils or hopefully a boat, and try to share that knowledge with the community. So there's many more examples, and happy to go into more detail, but those are a few highlights.
Great, that's awesome. Coming from U.S. Sailing's own Betsy Allison, are there any gender or age requirements when looking at the crew for the race?
Yeah, so as many people know, but maybe some don't, there's actually two classes in the ocean race, the 65s and the IMOCA 60s, as Charlie talked about earlier. The 60s have I should say both classes are mixed gender. And so that's a really exciting, I think, change for the race. It was something that you saw on every team in the last event, which was optional, and now it's actually compulsory. Although that's the case, we're in support of it. So there's a few different permutations, but the way we see it going in the 60s is that you'll have 4 males and 1 female on board the team, and there's no age requirement within the 60 class. And then with the 65s, Charlie, you may know the specifics better than me, but there's male and female, and then there's also under 26, under 30, and then kind of any age requirements. And I think there's also, you have to have done a Southern Ocean leg, or there's a number of, I think, additional requirements in the 65 class. So it'll be interesting to see all the teams come together.
So if you're an under 26-year-old female who's sailed through the Southern Ocean, you're looking pretty good.
Understandable, yeah. Question coming in from Nicholas Hartney, who's an Opti sailor. It's during this time, assuming that we're all quarantined or staying at home, what are you guys doing to stay in tune with sailing?
Good question, Nicholas.
Yeah, that's a very good question, especially with the landscape kind of changing every day. I mean, this has thrown, a big monkey wrench into our plans, obviously, but we're talking about a sailboat race, and there's bigger problems afoot, around the globe right now. So you got to kind of keep it all in perspective. But as we lose on the water time, we're constantly changing what our campaign and what our effort are going to look like. Mark and I spend a lot of time on the phone anyway. But I think, daily conversations about what the new normal will look like for us as we get started. And then there's the stuff that I think all other sailors are doing, playing online virtual sailing. We have the luxury of, possessing a simulator. So we're doing kind of some Amaka 60 type stuff from afar, and then just trying to, stay in shape. Certainly these, new Amaka 60s are very, very, very physical. Not to go all Tom Brady on you, but I think pliability and, just all that kind of stuff, injury prevention is going to be such a big deal. The attrition rate is going to be significant, to say the least. So that's kind of how, at least I'm feeling my days.
Mark, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think Charlie's right. It's trying to stay sharp on the mental side as much as possible. So I think, that's as simple as just talking about sailing, playing virtual regattas, reading up on different text that's out there, and also participating in some of these other podcasts. Just keeps it fresh in your mind. The physical fitness part's a big deal, and there's a fair bit that we can be doing remotely on that side of it. So just trying to use the time in a positive way to get as far ahead as we can.
Awesome. So seeing a couple comments here from some of our younger viewers, they are asking how can they set themselves up, or what's your best recommendations to follow in your footsteps?
It's a good question. Sailing, as everyone knows, is a little bit less defined in terms of the pathway than other sports. It's not like you go from college sailing to the professional leagues like you would in football or basketball or something like that. But I would say there's a few things when you look around the sport that are very consistent. One is work ethic, and I don't think that you can get to the top of anything, whether it be sport or otherwise, without being really, really dedicated and putting in the time, and being willing to take advantage of whatever opportunities come your way. Another is attitude, and that is such a big thing for us when we think about putting our teams together. Is of course you take sort of skill and expertise as somewhat of a given, but then after that it's all the personalities and the finer tuned dynamics of how are we going to get a group of people to work together in a very small space in a really high pressure environment for a really long period of time, and that's where the personalities and people's kind of ability to work together as a team is super important. I'd say for junior sailors out there looking to get to the top, there's so many opportunities out there, and I think it's a really exciting time to be a junior sailor. You look at things like Sail GP, and they've got that Inspire program and the WASPs, and you've seen that in other opportunities as well. We've been partnered with Oak Cliff out in Long Island, which is a great opportunity to develop more of the hand skills that oftentimes I'd say U.S. junior sailors in general, us included, lack relative to the way that it works in other countries where they have apprenticeships and whatnot. So, I'd say develop as many skills as you can, work as hard as you can, and really take every opportunity, to try to maximize it and do that with a smile on your face.
Great. All good stuff. Good info for sure. All right, let's see. What else do we have here? Question that I have is, do we think that with the foiling Amoka 60s, we're going to see 24-hour distance records fall like they have in previous editions of the race with the Volvo 70s?
I certainly think so. I think with the addition of foils, the boats are reaching speeds that they haven't seen before. And I think that, in this class, like we talked about, it's usually shorthanded, it's usually autopilot. Everything happens generally a little bit slower, but I think with, the old Volvo Ocean Race mentality kind of hitting this class of boat, it has the recipe to break a lot of records. For sure. I mean, we were doing 30 plus knots by accident, on the delivery back from Brazil. It happens pretty quick. And the potential for these boats right now is, pretty limitless.
It's not something you hear every day, 30 knots by accident.
With no one driving.
Yeah, that's the scary
autopilot.
part.
Yeah.
So that brings another question that I've seen posted here is that with the ability to push the boats a little bit harder, are there any design considerations to added structure for the extra loads associated with that for both the extra weight for the crew as well as how much faster you hope to be going?
Certainly. The old adage of to finish first, you must first finish is always in play. The reliability of these boats in pretty rugged parts of the world is a key concern, but also keeping the weight of the boat and the weight of the bulb specifically where they need to be makes that a difficult dance. The other thing to make note of is that, like I said, the rigs were one design, and they were designed at a point when nobody really envisioned this much stability, this much riding moment. So that's kind of the limiting factor in some ways, the fuse in the whole system. So knowing where the red line is for every single sail configuration, every single true wind angle, true wind speed, knowing how hard you can push is going to be one of the biggest factors in this class moving forward, especially with the added displacement of crew and gear. And I mean, some of these legs it could be 30 days. We provisioned the boat on the way back from Brazil, and it wasn't a lot of space for humans. And, some of these legs could have twice as much stuff on board. So, knowing where you are is going to be a big factor in all this.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So knowing that there are other teams that are out there building boats and doing things like that, is there any America's Cup aspect where you're trying to keep an eye on what they're doing, making sure you're not falling off the curve of with your boat or anything like that?
It's an interesting question. I have not personally done a cup, but I do know that this spying element and sending representatives from your team to other parts of the world to keep tabs on what other teams are doing is a thing. The ocean race, or I guess even offshore mentality, I don't think has adopted things that specific. But we're certainly keeping tabs on what the other teams are doing. It was mentioned earlier, but there were seven new IMOCAs that launched last year, and another one or two that are coming online this year. So all with different hull shapes and foil shapes and whatnot. So in a lot of ways, the TJB was the first time that all those boats lined up together in a race. So very interesting to look at some of the data and the results from that. And it's all about the foils. And what's interesting about the IMOCA class is generally the boats are fairly concentrated out there in Europe and France. So we don't have to go too far to see what's going on with some of the other boats.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And then another question about the boats, and apologize for the direction that's taking.
No, it's good.
Yeah. So looking at the boats, is there any commercial consideration to the boat that you guys are working on and making sure that it can go back to being shorthanded or vice versa? Is there a dual purpose intention for the boat, or are you guys looking exclusively for the ocean race at this point?
That's a really interesting dichotomy. I think eventually, if this concept catches on, there'll be kind of like a lowest common denominator for the IMOCA fleet, whereby you can sail these things with crew or single-handed. Right now, it's in a transitional phase, and transitioning from a single-handed or short-handed boat into a crewed boat is a bit of a process. That said, once we get crew-specific built IMOCAs, I think it'll be easier to transition back to a more shorthanded configuration. So, the marriage of the race itself and the IMOCA class is it's new. It's still in its honeymoon phase. Hopefully in its 5th anniversary, we have some some definition, some clarity. Right now, the IMOCA class runs through its own rule, and then they have what's called the CMC, which is the Crude Measurement Certificate. And those two kind of pathways, the core rule is written in French, so it's kind of hard to articulate, but are coming more in line every day. We're trying to make the rules for the ocean race and for the regular IMOCA shorthanded sailing as similar as they possibly can.
Yeah, I think the vision is that from a longer term perspective, you'll have this class of boat, which can be used single-handed for races like the Route de Rome and the Vendée Globe, double-handed for the TJV and, a few other races out there. And then in a more fully crewed context during the ocean race. And that it, longer term could be as simple as, taking out a few bunks and making a few other modifications. But ultimately that you could have one platform that you could do or use in multiple events.
And it's worth noting from a sustainability standpoint, that is a huge step forward, having a 4-year cycle for a boat that can compete in multiple events versus a purpose-built platform for a race that happens every 4 years and then is useless after that. So, and there's cost savings associated with that. It makes, the sport and the schedule more commercially viable. So if and hopefully when it catches fire, it's a good thing for everybody in the offshore sailing space.
Absolutely. So you guys were both tremendously involved in the very successful Wizard program. How does cross training on other types of boats really apply to to this campaign?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to have the support of the ASCUs and the Wizard program. We've been sailing with them now for I think 3, almost 4 years, and they've been very helpful to us in providing a platform, and we feel like we've been helpful to them as well, because anybody that we'd kind of want to go sailing with, they believe to be of a caliber that will help them win races. They're great guys. We've done some development there. We just recently, Mark and I sailed the 600 with those guys, which wasn't our best race, but the weather didn't really cooperate. But as a way to kind of get sailing with other people and kind of stay relevant and stay offshore, it's been great for us.
It's also just a great opportunity to go racing. Since we got the IMOCA 60 last summer, we've really only done one big race, which was the TJV, and a lot of prep time and training and various things that went into that. So we've done a ton of sailing, but not that much racing. So to have another platform and team to be a part of, to actually just get out and race, you can't simulate that. So that's been a really valuable experience, I'd say.
It's become a great team and kind of like a family environment. I wasn't able to do the Middle Sea race because it was so close to the TJV, but I had a little FOMO.
You missed the volcano, man, on my birthday.
It's become a cool thing, and kudos to those guys. We're certainly very appreciative.
Awesome. Yeah, they've been great. You guys have certainly helped out a bunch there. All right, looking at a couple other questions here from US Sailing's Jake Fish. What does ocean racing look like in 10 years from a participation standpoint? Will there be more teams with larger crews? What do you guys think on that?
Wow. Hey, Jake, what a great question. 10 years is a long way out. If you rewind 10 years ago, I guess the ocean racing scene with the Volvo and the crude stuff, it just switched from the 60s to the 70s. I guess maybe that was a little bit more than 10 years ago. But the design was wide open. So very similar to where we're at, I'd say, with the IMOCAs right now in the foiling. So if you fast forward that same trajectory to 10 years from now, I think you're going to see, fully foiling boats with far more optimized foil shapes and hull shapes, control systems. I think the sport's going to have to at some point make a decision as to how much we want that to have human input versus be automated. And you've seen, the Cup go through that decision as well a bit. But as it relates to offshore, stored power versus human power, I think that's going to be a big thing, and that'll drive the crew number decision a fair bit. It's going to be interesting. It'll be really interesting to see how the sport evolves over the next few years. Charlie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of taking a different approach to the answer, which was, I think, I don't have any statistics to back this up, absolutely zero, but I feel like the offshore part of the sport of sailing is growing. I think we, hear all these stories about sailing itself, kind of contracting, but I feel like offshore sailing has a lot of momentum because you can do it in all kinds of boats. Every day is different. There's still a sense of adventure. Now it's a good form of social distancing, as Mark insinuated. But, hopefully 10 years from now, offshore sailing has been one of the mediums that has helped sailing as a sport grow,
Yeah, awesome. So with that, one of the things we hear about a lot lately is how there's new offshore discipline coming to the Olympics. So the double-handed mixed gender offshore event. Would either of you, or do either of you have plans or eyes on that in the future?
Flip a coin for the sex change, or
Definitely not together.
Mark in a wig,
Yeah, no, I'd never say never. It's not our focus today, but the next Olympics is a fair way off. I think it's a really, incredible step that Olympic sailing's taken, and it's definitely going to make it a little bit more interdisciplinary, I guess. It should be really neat to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, he'd kill us for saying something, but a guy who we've worked with for a really long time is Bill Erklands, and he sails offshore with his wife, double-handed. He tries to do it every year to Hawaii, but don't sleep on those guys. They're pretty handy.
Yeah.
So I think we all have our favorites, which is great to see. It's nice to see some of those names that have flown under the radar for a while having a chance to bring themselves up in the
just to be
limelight.
clear, I'm not saying that they have any Olympic ambition at all, but but I think that as this class has developed, I think kind of secretly in the background, they've been doing it for a long time. They've given a lot of input on their experience over the last decade, basically.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk for a minute about sponsors. You guys have been really fortunate to land some pretty powerful sponsors for the past couple of iterations. Has that gotten any easier as you guys have moved forward? And do you think that's just representation in the market space? And any tips for other teams that are trying to come along?
Yeah, wow. The commercial element of this sport, and specifically the fundraising, is a big challenge. People have said it before, but I think both of us agree wholeheartedly. In a lot of ways, getting to the starting line is so much easier, or so much harder, than getting to the finish line. And just putting all of the funding together, getting the right partners in place, building a team, all of the sort of business and logistical aspects that go on to facilitate all that in the background. It's a massive undertaking. We've been fortunate to, have the partners that we've had, and we've had a wide range of them, everything from, Turkish stents with Alvamedica to, reinsurance companies and wind turbine, production companies in Denmark, and, 11th Hour, who are all about sustainability. And so we've been very fortunate to gain, I'd say, experience in multiple disciplines of it. And what it requires, in my humble opinion, is adaptability and creativity. What each particular partner that we've had has wanted to get out of the relationship has been very different. And so we've had to do a really good job at listening to understand, how we can best deliver them value. And that's really the lens that we look at it through. It is scary to think about what the corporate sponsorship world is going to look like coming out of this situation that we're in right now. So hopefully the economy is able to bounce back, and people still remain interested in sailing. But it's a big challenge. And for anyone that's interested, reach out. Happy to chat more about it.
Anybody that's interested in sponsoring anything, or anybody in advice? But no, I think in sailing, like Mark said, the value proposition, it's not as clear, it's not as evident. Depending upon the sponsorship, they can be very different. Watching a 30-second Super Bowl ad, it kind of speaks for itself. But we do a lot of listening, and it's what do you need? How can we help you versus, hey, here's what we have to offer. It's a very two-way conversation. And then I guess as we've gained experience, become a little bit more credible. I remember when we were kind of pitching our first campaign, we had all these PowerPoints and we were like superimposing ourselves into these slides and stuff. And then kind of when we were back at it after our first campaign, at least we could put ourselves in the presentation. So
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Coming from Sean O'Halloran, excuse me for butchering that name. How welcoming have the French IMOCA teams been to 11th hour racing in general? Have they helped you guys generally get up to speed? And have you been met with open arms, or have you had to really work your way in there?
What's going on, Sean? How are you? It's a really interesting question because the French offshore culture, and then within the IMOCA class specifically, I'd say from the outside, appeared pretty insular, and it was going to be, I think, interesting to see how that went for us. Big credit to Mayor Concept and Francois' organization for, I think, helping us out with that a fair bit. The training camp that Charlie referenced earlier, that's run by the Pole up in Port-La-Forêt, has been an incredible opportunity, and to be welcomed to that with open arms was really special. And I think it's a unique situation that we're in because our focus is on the ocean race, and you have all of these other teams that are primarily focused on the Vendée, and yet we're using the same boats. So to be able to interact with them and train and share ideas, but ultimately not do that in direct competition has I think eased some of what could have been barriers to entry.
Great. And then another one from Jake Fish. If you guys could invite one celebrity pro athlete to crew with you after some training, of course, who would it be?
Jazz?
I mentioned Tom Brady earlier because of his pliability, but he lives in Tampa now, so he's basically dead to me.
Mine would be John Florence. I don't know if anybody's seen his recent series that's come out called Vela, but he and I are both from Hawaii. He's got a gunboat out here. He just did he's super interested in sailing, I think, as a more exploratory way to connect with the ocean. And it'd be cool to have him out for a trip or something, see if we can make that happen at some point.
He's done some sailing with Oracle in the past, certainly, and I met him down. He did the Sydney Hobart race on the
him and Tom Slingsby on the CLGP and stuff. Yeah.
Ichiban 60, that was called Winning Appliances, I think, when I was down there. So that'd be cool to get him out.
Cool. Good question. All right, so I think we've got time for a couple more. Another personal one for me. For each of you, what's your favorite boat that you've ever sailed?
Personally, it depends. I mean, probably the one that we're sailing on right now. But there's also something to be said for, I got a Herreshoff Bullseye, like a 16-foot fiberglass day sailor that I get to sail kind of in my free time with my wife and my kids, and eat goldfish and drink beer, and that's a big part of it for me too. Is just being able to have fun, with the sport that we love, that we're also lucky enough to call our profession.
You've got some footage of just going in circles with your kids out there.
Okay. Use it to spin around until I retake the helm.
For me, it's probably the 65 that we did the last 2 laps on. As Charlie mentioned, we've done so many miles on that boat, experienced some incredible highs and lows, and just I think you spend that much time on the same boat, you develop a little bit of nostalgia for it.
Absolutely understand that one.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're about to wrap up here. Do you guys have any last parting words for the audience out there?
I just hope that everybody's doing well, staying safe, practicing social distancing. It's just an unbelievable and sort of unique time. I know people are starting to go stir crazy. I certainly feel like I am sometimes, but it's been great to see. I think generally how the sailing community has come together. all the different ways that people are trying to interact and support each other. So hope everyone's staying safe.
Yeah, we're just glad to be a small part of it, and thanks so much for having us. It's kind of weird just talking to you and knowing that there's other people watching, but I guess that's just part of the new world.
That's just the way it goes.
Thank you very much, guys. We really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark and Charlie, for joining us today. And thank you to the viewers for tuning in. If you guys want to see more from Mark and Charlie and the 11th Hour team, make sure you check them out on social media. We've posted those links in the live stream description. If you've enjoyed today's session, please be sure to support our efforts and build a community of active and engaged sailors through the U.S. Sailing Starboard portal by purchasing or renewing your U.S. Sailing membership. We have a lot of great content coming up on the schedule, and thanks to U.S. Sailing members, we're able to adapt and evolve to better serve sailors with content like this. Thanks again to Mark and Charlie. Visit us at ussailing.org/membership to join or renew today. Thanks again, and have a great afternoon and evening, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Take care.